drought, collapsing crude oil prices, and a bitter political divide. That's the toxic mix that's now triggered full-blown riots in Venezuela. The heyday of Hugo Chavez long gone, as his successor fights off moves to chase him from office by a new right-wing majority in parliament. The rationing in the streets now extends to electricity, with schools shut, and the president this week declaring a 2-day work week for civil servants. All this while the country runs short of even paper to print money. Can Nicolas Maduro hang on any more than his Brazilian counterpart Dilma Rousseff? Like she, he blames plotters that Maduro says are backed by the United States. We're going to look at the impact of Washington's recent renewal of targeted sanctions against his entourage and its warming of relations with Venezuela's longtime ally, Cuba, as well as the changing political winds throughout the Americas. Today in the France 24 debate, is at the boiling point in Venezuela, and with us from Caracas, Andrew Rosati, reporter for Bloomberg News. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
From Washington, D.C., Mark Weisbrot, contributor to Venezuela Analysis and the co-director of the left-leaning Center for Economic and Policy Research. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Venezuelan opposition supporter for the Movement of Democratic Unity, Paula Dumergue, is here with us in the studio. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
And from Chicago, Daniel Landsberg Rodriguez of business consultants Green Mantle. Always a pleasure, sir.
Thank you for having me on again.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. The 2-day work week, one of the factors that triggered that rioting scene in several cities on Wednesday. Clément Bonnereau has more.
Fighting over bags of flour in Venezuela's second largest city. Hours earlier, dozens were arrested for looting shops and grabbing food in supermarkets, wreaking havoc.
They took everything, the computer and the merchandise.
Here we are. We're completely unsafe. We can't stay open. We can't do anything.
Violence comes as many Venezuelans are increasingly frustrated at repeated food shortages and a worsening energy crisis, which is causing daily blackouts. Socialist President Nicolas Maduro is largely being held responsible for driving the country to the brink. The opposition, which has a majority in parliament, has started collecting signatures, hoping to hold a referendum to remove him from power.
We will collect the 4 million signatures needed for the referendum to go ahead. Then we'll hold the referendum and we will win it.
In the capital, Caracas, thousands of people have taken to the streets. Maduro, however, does not seem worried. Speaking on national television on Wednesday, he pledged to stay in office until at least 2018.
Let's respect them. Let's let them do their stuff. Nothing they're doing is politically viable anyway.
If the referendum is successful, new elections could be called as early as next January.
Before we go into the politics, Andrew Rosati, let me begin with you. What's daily life like these days in Caracas?
I think it's safe to say that a lot of aspects of daily life here has been deteriorating at a fairly rapid level. Shortages of everything from car parts to chickens to basic medicines like aspirin, even the more serious things like cancer drugs are increasingly short supply. It's not uncommon to see long lines stretching across the capital in front of pharmacies, supermarkets, bodegas. And then when you get out of the capital, these things are much, much more intense. This is coupled by a big deterioration in citizen security. There's a kind of unofficial time to go home where you at 7, 8 o'clock at night, the streets dwindle out because many Venezuelans are afraid of the rising crime wave here. So things like kidnappings, muggings are very, very common here. So on a lot of basic aspects here, daily life has become very unpleasant for average Venezuelans.
And it's all coming to a head with this push that we saw to recall President Maduro. How's that going?
I think you need to be very careful when you say coming to a head. Yes, yesterday was the first day where people were coming out and people did flock to the streets. There was a big surprise in the sense the amount of people that went out. There were big lines in various parts of Caracas that I saw, people waiting to sign across from all walks of life to get this process going. But I would refrain to say coming from a head in a violent standpoint. Yes, there was unrest in the western city of Maracaibo. There was looting in and around Caracas yesterday. But so far, the push to be Maduro, from what I've seen, has been in an administrative level. People have been signing and we're waiting to seeing, and both sides are really pushing people to remain calm in this tense climate.
All right, before we talk about who to blame politically, we should say that a lot of people are blaming for the current situation, especially those power blackouts, the weather. Yes, Venezuela sits on the world's largest oil reserves, but it's hydroelectric power that keeps the light on in the country. The only problem is that as millions have been lifted out of poverty and bought TVs and air conditioners, the grid hasn't kept pace. The amount of electricity produced is flat, and that's bad news because of a severe drought due to the El Nino weather phenomenon, which means they've had to shut the turbines at the Guri Dam, also known as the Simon Boulevard Hydroelectric Center. The situation with electricity, Daniel Landsberg, a bit akin to what our viewers in Nigeria know, sitting on Africa's largest oil reserves and yet also having power outages.
Yeah, there are some similarities there. I always feel I have special connection when I have Nigerian friends or students, as where we're sort of failed oil state brethren. There's a lot in common, except their currency, black market to legal, I think, is 2 times devaluated, which would be a significant improvement over Venezuela's current currency regimen. But the Guri question is actually a really important one. Not all the turbines are shut down. In fact, all of them are on the cusp of being affected. Basically, right now, it's about 1 meter, I believe, and a third over the levels at which point the first 2 turbines would be shut down, and about 6 more would be affected. But it has to go down about another 12 meters before it would shut down entirely, which would be unlikely unless rainy season just decided to skip this year, which probably wouldn't take place. But where there is an interesting issue here is that you mentioned that the grid had not kept pace with sort of development, with people buying televisions, with people buying appliances. And there's some truth to that. But at the same time, Venezuelans use more electricity than any other country in the world, or at least every other country in Latin America, on a per capita basis. And the reason for that isn't that they have more appliances. It's the fact that energy is so heavily subsidized for the middle class that it's essentially free. It's very cheap. You don't really have to budget with it. And for much of the lower classes, it's actually just illegally hooked up and then not policed. So the incentives for Venezuelans to come home and shut off their air conditioner or to not leave their television running are actually quite low from an economic standpoint, which is one of the things that the government is trying to convince people to do now, or has been with sort of middling success, just because people have gotten very used to not having electricity usage be something that they have to monitor.
Mark, let me bring in Mark Weisbrot on this. Mark, it sounds like over the years, Venezuela has not prepared for the eventuality of that price of oil going down.
Well, I think that's one thing. I want to correct you just on one thing, the introduction. I don't write for Venezuela Analysis. I don't know, you put that in. I do write a monthly column for Últimas Noticias, which is the largest private newspaper in Venezuela.
Correction duly noted.
Prepared for the oil price downturn. I think, they could have accumulated more reserves, of course, but I don't think that's the fundamental problem. I mean, a country that has, more than 300 billion barrels of oil in the ground, proven reserves, and 50 billion at least assets in foreign reserves, that is things that they could sell to get cash right now, really shouldn't be facing and doesn't have to face a balance of payments crisis. And so they could fix this. And I think they might, but it's definitely fixable. They could sell assets. I mean, they sold they raised a couple $2 billion from a deal with a mining company, gold reserves, and just recently. And so there are a lot of things they could do, but mainly they would have to fix the exchange rate system. And I think that's that's kind of the heart of their problem, because they're trapped in this kind of inflation depreciation spiral where the black market rate goes up, and that fuels more inflation because imports become more expensive, and then that goes back into the black market rate. And so that's what they would have to break out of.
Paulo Dumont, do you agree that Venezuela's problems are not an energy policy problem, but more of a balance of payments, financial kind of problem?
I actually do not agree that there is a problem. I mean, the real problem is not the energy crisis here. I think it is a real problem. It is the economy. It is the crisis of the economy, and that has been caused, of course, of the lack of political will of this government that has been in power for almost 2 decades. We had the highest oil prices for so many years, and we're not even capable of providing electricity, not even capable to have foods in the supermarkets. And seeing the images that you just showed here in the show, I think the main problem in Venezuela is that we're lacking everything. We're lacking food, we're lacking electricity, we're lacking political will, and we're lacking paper too, even to print our money. The problem is, and that is, I think there is a problem that is going to face the government, is that they will lack paper for the forms that the people will be filling to sign the revocation of Nicolás Maduro, and that it's happening now, and that I think is the only way we can get out of this crisis. I think it is not where is the crisis. I think the crisis is all over. It's generalized, and it is so big that we cannot say it is one thing or the other.
What will a change of leadership bring?
I think it will bring a change just to begin, because we've been I cannot even remember the president before Chavismo. And I think that is a good thing, because we will have democracy. What we will have most of all is freedom of political prisoners, of the press, of expression, food in the shelves. I think that would be a good start.
Andrew Rosati, your thoughts on what is this crisis right now, and who's to blame for it?
I think the crisis is really multifaceted. There, as I mentioned before, there's a big crisis in the sense of citizen security. There's also the problem of the collapsing medical system, the collapsing electrical grid, as we've mentioned, and the shortages of food supply. One of the big issues at hand is a lot of people who are watching Venezuela would say this is kind of the perfect storm, in the sense that everything is happening at once on top of these very low oil prices. Hindsight is 2020, I suppose, and many will say that this they should have saved and they should have done now. The big issue now is that I would say that neither side is really posting a clear plan moving forward. Both sides, there was a big change, a political wave of change recently with the elections. But I would say the sense that I get from talking to a lot of Venezuelans in the street is they were voting for a solution to their daily problems. We're seeing a big push now for a change in leadership, but a lot of what I'm hearing from people on the streets is they're tired of waiting in line for food. They're tired of waiting in line for medicines. They're tired of the electric rations. They want a solution to their daily problems. And a lot of what you hear are not these solutions, but rather new political pushes for new political leadership and push for a rotation of cabinet members, a new plan. And I think a lot of Venezuelans are just very frustrated. That's what I hear from them, at least talking.
Mark Weisbrot, you agree?
Well, partly. I mean, first of all, there are a lot of things that are left out. First of all, the United States has been trying to topple this government for the last 14 years. They supported a military coup in 2002. That's well documented. They paid the people who were involved in it. They supported regime change, violent regime change in 2013.
So you're saying the current turmoil is the fault of the United States?
No, but I'm saying that there's a problem. You know, it's a bit like talking about Ukraine without ever mentioning Russia, okay? There's another power that is involved, and it's a matter of public record here in the United States. The Congress appropriates millions of dollars a year that go directly to the opposition. Now, what difference does this make? I think it makes a difference because I think it's made the opposition more hardline. When there's always been a part of the opposition that wanted violent regime change. There's other strategies. For instance, there's people who want to have go a legal route. They want to have a recall referendum. They want to have, and they'll challenge Maduro in the next election. But there's always a part that has tried to do it through violence. For the first 4 years, that was the entire opposition from 1999 to 2003. It was a strategy of military overthrow. They admitted that. And so that's always there. And that faction always finds support from within the United States foreign policy establishment, whether it's the Pentagon, the CIA, the 17 intelligence agencies, the White House National Security Council. I mean, that's a very big national security state we have. And there's always some part that's willing to support the violent overthrow of the government. And that's, for me, that's a major worry because, if the oil prices, by the way, have recovered considerably in the last few months. World oil prices have gone from 32 to 46 or $30 to $46 a barrel. So, oil prices are probably going to recover more. The government is paying a quarter of its oil revenue to China right now. I'm sure they'll get relief from that. And as I said, they can sell all kinds of assets for reserve. So there are sustainable economic solutions, and the executive can do them without Parliament. And there will still be, I think that's where it gets more dangerous, is then if the opposition cannot, or the part of the opposition that wants the violent overthrow prevails, you're going to see a lot more trouble.
Daniel Landsberg.
And they'll get support from here.
Daniel Landsberg, do you agree with that?
Absolutely not. I think that I'd be very curious to see where it is that the opposition, which can agree on what side of the bed to get out of in the morning, all got together and said that for the first 4 years, the only plan was military overthrow. I'd be curious to see where in the record.
Actually, you can see it. You can see it if you want. It was written by Teodoro Petkov, who's an opposition leader. He said it. He wrote it. He said that their strategy was a strategy of military overthrow. That was his words. And it was. For 4 years, that's what they did, until they finally gave up after the oil strike.
You view Mr. Petkov as a type of opposition Lorax who speaks for what is, at this point, around 65% of the Venezuelan population.
All right, we're gonna pick up on this. When we come back, we're going to take a very quick break. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.